If you don't want to work with somebody for the rest of your life, don't work with them for a single day. When it comes to culture fit, just ask yourself, do I like this person? Do I want to work with this person? Would I put the future of my company in this person's hand? 99 out of 100 times when a hire goes tremendously wrong and it's like a catastrophic hire, the person that hired them will say, I wish I'd listened to my gut early on. I knew right away something wasn't quite right. When you have doubt, move on. No matter how painful it is, the better you get at this, the better you'll get at hiring, the more successful you're going to be as an entrepreneur.
Hey everybody, Desiree Echeverria here, joined as always by my personal life coach, Steli Efti, founder and CEO of Close. And today we're going to be talking about hiring the right people at the right time for your startup, because the people you hire can make or break your startup, especially in the beginning. And your hiring needs are going to change as your business scales. But it's so important to get it right, though it's so easy to get it wrong. And Steli, since you've hired about 1 billion people in your life, I wanted to pick your brain about what founders can expect if they've never hired anyone before, or if they've only hired a few people before. So my first question, square one, what are some signs that it's time to make your startup's first hire?
Well, I would say having too many customers to support, right, or to deal with, or too many people that are interested in buying your product and want to get a demo or want to get on a negotiation with you to, negotiate a contract. Having real work, what I would call quote unquote, right, like work that has to do with the usage of your product is scaling and the servers are breaking down and you can't keep up with all the feature requests that people have that actually use the product. Having a lot of success or success-based work is a good sign that you should hire some people to deal with all that work. That's simple, though. Nobody mistakes that. When that happens, everybody knows they need help and they need to go and hire some people to help them. I think it's when that success is not quite as rocket ship, where people make the mistake of being either a little too early or a little too late. So I would say, in my career, I've always been leaning more on the little too late side of things, and that has served me well. Although that is frustrating, can be very frustrating too. But I'd rather hire a little too late than too early. I think too early will cause all kinds of problems that might really be in the way of having any success whatsoever, even down the line. So you don't want to hire people anticipating work that is down the line only going to be an issue once you've had success and you're not nowhere near that success, right? So, sometimes I see startups that have like a head of HR, a CFO, and something else, and they don't yet even have a minimal viable product. They haven't launched anything. They have no funding, just some dude with a PowerPoint presentation, and they're like, well, I assembled a team, and it's all kinds of positions that you really don't need to either build or to sell what you're doing. So early days, if people aren't building the product with you, they should be selling it. If they are not doing one of these two things, they probably shouldn't be there.
You have to find a balance between hiring for your immediate needs versus long-term growth. So, you talk about hiring, let's say, leadership too early. When do you prioritize hiring like specialists versus generalists? Like what is, the logical progression into what roles you're hiring for in the beginning?
Roughly speaking, there's always exceptions to this, but roughly speaking, you want to lean more towards a generalist in the early days, simply because you're probably going to have to pivot, adapt, and change a number of times until you hit something approximating product market fit and really knowing what you're doing, what you're all about, who your customer truly is. A lot of that is going to be very sort of up in the air and should be open to change. And so hiring deeply specialized people very early on will actually be in the way of moving fast enough, changing fast enough, adapting to what's really going out there. So you're probably going to lean more on the generalist side of things because things are changing so quickly. And you need people that can run multiple different experiments and that feel empowered to take on projects and sort of manage them A to Z. A developer that also knows a little bit of front end, back end, a bit of design, and can sort of like put together an MVP all on their own is going to serve you much better in the early days than needing to have somebody that's a super good backend person, front end developer, a designer, like needing to have like 5 people anytime you want to experiment with a quick thing, a quick minimal viable product. So early on, probably more on the generalist side of things. Now, as your company scales, as you solidify what your product is, what your target audience is, you're going to start hiring more and more specialized roles. And eventually, once you hit real scale, it's probably going to be mostly very specialized roles. But early on, and for a good amount of time, typically you're going to lean more on more generalist people that can wear multiple hats, can do multiple things, and that love to move really fast, prove things, try things out. That's sort of the type of person you're going to be looking for.
So let's talk more about the type of person that you're going to be looking for. What else do they have, going for them? Like who thrives in an early stage startup environment? And just as importantly, who doesn't thrive in an early stage startup environment?
That's a good question. Well, I would say some observations that I've made are not groundbreaking. People that move fast, people that love to learn, that are very curious, people that are very driven, very smart, really ambitious, curious, people that have shown that they like building things or figuring out how to create things, how to ship things. Doesn't matter if it's product or marketing or sales, people that like to take action, have a bias towards action, and people that are excited and thrilled by a lack of structure, a lack of process, a lack of direction sometimes, and that see that as an open field to go explore, learn, generate insights, and help sort of uncover the successful path the company has to take. Those people will thrive, more generally because they are joining something that is in flux, that is in constant change, and is not clearly defined, and they'll have the most success if they're able to sort of operate in that kind of an environment. People that don't do well usually in startups are people that look for a lot of guidance, that want clear instructions, that are more reactive than proactive, right? Nobody told me I should do this. Nobody said to me that this is something I should look into. People that um, maybe are sort of more interested in their own career path beyond the thrill of being part of something great, right? If you are interested in your title, in your immediate sort of salary, in all the benefits that you're going to get today, if that's sort of if you're maximizing for that, a lot of times joining a company that's a lot bigger will help you play the game of the career much better and optimize and maximize for titles, promotions, benefits, bonuses, salaries, and so on and so forth, more than a startup where at the beginning maybe everybody has no title or the titles really are meaningless, and where salaries maybe in the very early days are smaller, and where there's just more risk to fail, or more risk that you are not going to do as well, because the company itself will constantly change what they even need of you and what they need you to do. So people that are looking for that sort of more structured environment, that thrive when they, I used to say, there's people that know how to learn how to play a game really, really well, and then they're great players. And then there's people that love to invent new games, right? So for your startup, you want people that love to invent new games, not people that are sort of great at learning a game and then playing it and maximizing and optimizing for winning as much as humanly possible.
I like that. I remember also one time you said hire people who operate in chaos, because in the early days, like you're always everything's changing, and somebody who really is more of like a process oriented person who needs to like inherit a process is going to be so frustrated by that. Whereas somebody else who sees chaos and is like, oh, I love solving puzzles. I love seeing the green field of chaos. I can bring order to that. I also think that, I'm someone who's worked at startups too. I've never founded a startup, but I've been like an early employee at startups. And it takes a certain amount of like humility and a lack of ego. Like I got hired at this one startup where I was like employee number 30 or something. They had just gotten Series A and just moved into a big office. And I got hired as a writer. And my first day there, I'm building my own IKEA desk and I'm building my own furniture. I'm helping other employees build furniture. I'm like, I was hired to write here, but like, you know what? Leave your ego at the door. we're going to get gritty, we're going to get scrappy, and that would not be the case for every writer that walks through the door. So it definitely takes a little bit of a lack of ego. What role does company culture play in those hiring decisions? Like, how do you assess? I know culture fit is sort of a buzzword these days, but how do you assess for culture fit when you don't even have a culture yet necessarily?
Well, I think you always have a culture, right? You might not be aware of it. You might not be able to codify it and write it down or communicate it very clearly or succinctly, or even accurately. But there is always a culture. When there's multiple people involved and they're interacting with each other, doesn't matter if it's your family, a friend group, or a startup. There's going to be things that are valued that will be optimized for, and things that aren't valued. There's going to be a certain codex of how do we communicate, how do we collaborate, and what do we value as a group, and what are we trying to accomplish, and how do we go about it. That's going to just be established very quickly without words, right? And it starts with the founders or with the founder. So whoever starts the company is basically the sets up the DNA of what is going to be valued, what is going to be prioritized, and how you're going to be going about accomplishing the things that you're trying to accomplish, and also reversing what isn't valued, what isn't appreciated, what is rejected in that group environment. And so I think first you need to accept and be aware that you have a culture, you have a company culture, even if you've never written it down anywhere, it exists. And I think when it comes to culture fit, I mean, there's some simple things that you could do that don't sound very scientific, but they work. I mean, at the most basic level, I think you need to be looking at people and asking yourself, do I trust this person? And am I excited to be working with them? Right? And these seem so simple. These questions seem so obvious that it's easy to overlook them. But I've learned over many, many years of building and running and growing companies, as well as advising and helping a lot more people run their own companies, that most people fail even at this very basic first test. Like, they hire and they don't answer the question, do I fully trust this person? Do I believe this person? And they don't answer the question, am I excited to be working with this person? All they're thinking about is this person very smart? Does this person have connections that could be really benefiting me? Am I making a mistake? I don't quite trust or like this person, but this person seems to be promising all these, very appealing things to my company. There, if it's a salesperson, oh, they say they have this huge Rolodex and they could bring in all these big clients for me. And that is so appealing that they override their own internal compass that says, this person is not trustworthy and I don't want to be talking to this person. And so if you don't want to work with somebody for the rest of your life, don't work with them for a single day. Again, easy to say, very hard to practice. We humans suck at having principles that we keep when they're under fire, when it's difficult, right? When you have stress, you want to move forward with all the work that's going on in your company, and you're under pressure to fill that role, and you've been interviewing and interviewing and interviewing, and you can't find somebody great, and then somebody comes along that seems okay. It's going to be very difficult not to sort of lean towards hiring that person, overriding some of the doubts that you have, and then figuring out that it was a tremendous mistake. And so when it comes to culture fit, just ask yourself, do I like this person? Do I want to work with this person? Would I put the future of my company in this person's hands? Or maybe even more personally, would I let this person live in my home and I would feel safe that they won't steal, they won't rob me, they won't cause any sort of big problems? And maybe this isn't the best question to ask yourself, but the basic spirit is at the core true, which is just ask yourself, is this someone that I want to work with? And if the answer is yes, it's a pretty good indication that it's going to be good to get started with at the very early days of your company.
You spend half of your waking hours, at least like 8 hours a day, half of your waking hours with your coworkers. So you better be around people you like. And I would also add that, especially with a startup, a lot of it at the beginning is innovating. And you can't innovate with people who, you don't, there's not a good chemistry. It's not a good chemistry fit. And so it's interesting because you can't necessarily measure for that other than a little bit of gut feeling and avoiding the temptation to just get a warm body in a seat. which I know can be a very great temptation when you're all under duress. So, what are some other common mistakes that you've seen startup founders make when they were hiring?
Yeah, well, these mistakes are definitely all mistakes that I've made myself and that I've seen a lot of people make. There are many things, but I would say, again, when I think of like common patterns, it's ignoring your gut, ignoring your intuition. Most people will override their intuition when it comes to bad hires because reasons, because I might be wrong. Like I had this for a long time where because I'd been wrong sometimes about people, I thought this isn't somebody I want to work with. And then it turned out that person was pretty good and pretty successful in their career. Or I thought this person is really great. And then it turned out that person wasn't that great. I sort of took that level of humility and started telling myself, well, who knows, right? I don't really know. Even if I feel strongly positively or negatively about somebody, I really don't know. I think that that is accurate and still something I believe today. I don't really know, but I don't need to be, 100% correct. This is not what it's all about. I'm going to make mistakes. It's just a question of what kind of a mistakes am I going to make. And most founders make the mistake that they hire people, and when it turns out that these people have been a catastrophe, in the worst case scenarios, the founder or the hiring manager knew right away on day one, on day two. They had immediate doubts. Seems like a great person, but kind of weird the way they approach day one, or kind of weird their first week. I expected something different. And then they start negotiating and fighting with themselves and going, well, but it's just week one, or it's just day one. Let's wait a little. They start going, well, but they've done some good things. Let's give this a bit more time. And 99 out of 100 times, when a hire goes tremendously wrong and it's like a catastrophic hire, the person that hired them will say, I wish I'd listened to my gut early on. I knew right away something wasn't quite right. It's very hard. Hiring is very tough because it takes a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of effort. And then when you make a hire, you're so biased to want that hire to work out that you can't think clearly enough. That's where most founders and most managers in startups make mistakes. They hire somebody that isn't quite right. And when they have early warning signs, they ignore and wait and try to be patient. And you just have to be brutally fast with these decisions. When you have doubt, move on, no matter how painful it is. And when you hire somebody and there's early negative signs, you need to part ways, right? Like you need to be merciless about it. And I've struggled with that my entire life. It's been very, very difficult. Um, and so I would say not listening to your gut is such a simple thing. We've heard this, and everybody has experienced this in areas in their lives. But just because it's simple doesn't make it something that you can like skip over to more interesting or more novel mistakes that people make hiring. No, you have to master this. The better you get at this, the better you'll get at hiring. The more successful you're going to be as an entrepreneur. And the other thing that I'll say as a mistake, it's not really well, it can be a mistake, is that if there's one common mistake I see people make when it comes to hiring is that they don't listen to their gut, and the other one is that they set the standards too low. You set your standards too low. No matter where they are, you can adjust them up, right? And you will know that you're doing this well if every year you set higher and higher and higher standards for the type of people that you want to bring into your company. Um, Again, easy to say, not that complicated, not sort of like thing I've never heard before about hiring or could not conceive myself of. But when I look at the people that are crushing it, that have way more success than anybody else, and I look at how they think about hiring and what kind of standards they apply when they interview people, it scares me. They're just like on a totally different level. And then when I look at the very successful people, they're pretty harsh. They set pretty high standards. And then it's just I can set the bucket of like where your success will be as an entrepreneur based on how high or low your standards are on hiring. And one thing that every startup has in common that I've ever seen that failed, that had enough success to hire, right? To like hire 10, 20, 30, 40 people, but ultimately failed. One thing they all have in common, I would always look at the team, talk to a couple of people there and be like, wow, they, they hire people that are just not right for a startup. They hire people that we would never hire. Um, and so the common threat there is that startups fail because they hire people that are just not, ambitious enough, biased enough towards action, smart enough, resourceful enough, creative enough, talented enough in their areas, curious enough. Um, that's really, at the end of the day, your company will not be the plans you make or the pitch decks you put together, but the people you hire. And so you want to have outstanding success, hire outstanding people. Easier said than done. It's very, very, very difficult to do this. But whatever your standards are, if you want to see more success, you have to increase them. You have to level them up. And that's something that a lot of people really struggle with.
You kind of already answered a little bit my next question, but I'm going to ask it anyway, just to like put a finer point on it. I'm going to ask you two questions. When you think back on the best hires you've made, is there anything they had in common? And when you look back at the worst hires you've made or your worst hiring decisions you've ever made, is there anything those hires had in common?
Yeah, so I'll start with the worst ones and we'll work our way to the best ones. So for me, everybody has weak spots, everybody has weaknesses, and everybody has strengths. There's sort of a hiring quadrant. I don't know which management consulting firm put this together, or which Harvard or which business school put this together, but there's this hiring quadrant, and it's sort of like willing and capable, willing but not capable, unwilling and capable, unwilling and not capable, right? And so obviously we all want to hire the willing and capable, the people that are incredibly good at what they do and have incredibly good attitude about everything, right? That's awesome. Those are awesome people, rock stars, whatever, superstars, whatever you want to call them. And then obviously and when you meet a person like that, it's not very difficult to identify. When you meet a person like this, everybody in the company goes, "Wow, this person is incredible." You can even feel it, and even in the early days before the person has done a lot of work, people already feel excited about this person being around. Right? There's just a quality about them that we all recognize pretty quickly. That's not difficult to hire for, to look for, right? It's difficult to find, but it's not difficult to look for, and it's not difficult to identify. The opposite of that, the unwilling and incapable, are also not that difficult to figure out, right? Somebody that sucks at what they do and they have shitty attitude about it. Not that challenging to not hire that person, right? Most companies are going to do okay, especially most startups, not going to be really tempted to hire these people. There's two other groups, right? These two are a little trickier. It's the capable but unwilling, and it's the incapable but willing. Those are usually weak spots for startups. I would say that most startups that I've observed have a problem in the willing, the capable but not willing bucket, right? So it's the hire assholes, people that seem very smart, that seem kind of good at what they do and ambitious, but they're just horrible, have horrible attitudes. That's where most companies make most of their hiring mistakes. It's never been an issue for me. I've never been tempted to hire somebody, no matter how exceptional you are. If I feel I can't trust you, if you feel that you have a corrupt character, there's no temptation for me. Like, there's nothing interesting to me about this. I've never hired somebody like that. I've never hired somebody that I thought was a terrible person, but was so good or so experienced or so fill in the blank. That never happened. That's not my weakness. My weakness is the other one, which is the people that aren't quite capable yet, but are really willing, right? The underdog, the person that's a bit too junior, that comes from a different background, that is not quite where you want them to be, but they're so hungry and they have such a great story, and they're so willing that you want to give them a chance. And when you give a person like that a chance and they grow into capable and willing, that's a big success, right? That's a huge return on investment that the company makes, because a lot of other companies might not hire this person, and so you make that investment, you'll get an outsized return. It's very exciting. I, for most of my life, was this person. In many areas still am this person, so I have a bias towards these people, right? I have a soft spot. I want to hire the not quite capable but willing and help them sort of grow. But I made this mistake too many times, where the delta, the gap of where they needed to be today in their skill set and where they really were was just too big, right? And so I, in the past, would hire people and would take them on as personal coaching projects, and so like work day and night, try to help this person overcome some some skill gap, experience gap, or personality gap to be really great at a job that they really, really wanted to be great at, but they just weren't there yet. And they maybe needed 5 years to get there, and I needed them today to be there. I made those mistakes early on in my career. And one pattern has been that delta has been shrinking. So maybe early on I would hire people that needed 10 years to get there, then 5, then 2, then a year, and it's been shrinking ever since. But it's still a soft spot of mine, and so I'm very aware of it today, that no matter how much you want it, I need to believe I can get you there in 3 months, not in a year, right? Because it's always going to take a little longer. So if I think
Mm-hmm.
3 months, it might take 6 months. But I need to be careful not to be hiring people that are just not there yet, and that will learn and grow, you know, basically on my startups, on my company's dime. And then a year, 2, 3 from now, they'll join another company, and that company will have an amazing person. But I just invested in education, but I'm not in a position to do that. Once you're like 100,000 employees and you've been around for 100 years, you can do that. But as a startup, you can't. So that's been a mistake that I've personally made. Other people make different, different type of mistake. And then the other thing that I'll say is the not listening to the gut. When a new person joins a company, joins your team, within the first week, within the first month, there should be a growing excitement about this person. If there is no such growing excitement, it's probably a big red flag that you didn't hire the right person. And so acting on that red flag early, aggressively, with urgency is a mistake that I made many times, and I've gotten better at it, but it's still challenging at times.
What do you think about like being very explicit? I saw a startup do this one time where they said everybody has 90 days, and at the end of 90 days it's sort of sink or swim. You might be let go, you'll get a severance package that's like a 6 month severance package, but this is the Thunderdome. You got 90 days. At the end of 90 days, we're going to do a full assessment and sort of lighting a fire under people that attracts a certain type of person, that repels a certain type of person. And I've seen that happen. A bit of a controversial thing to do. What do you think about something like that?
We did something very similar. I think for any role that wasn't an engineering role, I don't know how long we did this, but in the first couple of years, we definitely would always hire somebody first on a contractor basis. I don't know if it was after 2 or 3 months, then you would get sort of employee status. So we did something similar. We had a similar philosophy in the early days where we'd say, hey, we want to work with you, but the truth is, you don't know if you're going to like working with us and working here. And we don't know, no matter how many interviews we make. So let's work together for a while, get to know each other in the real world, and then we'll make a long term commitment. And a lot of people didn't like that. Some people were like, hell yeah, I'm actually excited by that challenge. And you want to have people, typically you want to air more on the people that will be comfortable with that level of risk because they believe in themselves and they're excited about risk. If you have people that are like, no, this is risky, I don't want risk. Well, why do you join a startup with 6 people, right? And no product market fit?
Yeah.
Like maybe this isn't the right environment for you. I think for engineers, we didn't do this because it was just not something that was, you know, in the sort of philosophy of how engineers were hired in startups at the time. And so it would have been very difficult to compete with that sort of philosophy. But maybe the world has changed in that regard. Today, we're now over 100 people. We've been around for over a decade. We don't do this philosophically. I still believe it's a good attitude to have, to understand on both ends that just because it's like saying we've dated a couple of times and now we need to decide. We've been to 3 dates, lunch, dinner, and breakfast, and now we're gonna have to decide marriage or no marriage. You're moving in, and then if we move in a marriage, it has to work forever. That would seem kind of radical as an approach. And I think when it comes to working relationships, we'll see that loosen up a lot more. But I believe that no matter if we had 3, 4, 5 calls, we don't know if this is going to be a great fit until we start working together. So I think that philosophy is valid. And that strategy could work for many companies.
So we've talked a lot about hiring, but there's another side to this, which is retention. And a lot of startups struggle with this because things change all the time. Your team can look completely different at the end of 2 years. The original team you hired won't be there anymore. It's a whole new set of people, and is 4x'd in size. But close, from what I can tell from the outside, it doesn't look like it has as much retention problems. I could be wrong, but I look around and I see people who have been here for years and years. You have some of the longest retention I've ever seen. Nick, who's I think what is he, VP of operations or something, started out as just like a sales guy on staff like a decade ago. So you have a lot of people that you've grown. How do startups like you retain people over the long term?
Yeah, so I think our average retention for senior leaders is like 8 years or 9 years by now. So we have people that have been here for 11 years. Um, we have great retention and probably very exceptional one. That's also the number one thing I hear from new employees as well as from people that are interviewing at the company. It's one of the top things that they're surprised by is when they look at our Glassdoor reviews, and then when they talk to a bunch of people and they realize, wow, at close, people stick around. They seem to really really like this company. So when it comes to retention, I'll attempt to answer the retention question with the what makes great employees question that we didn't get to earlier. I think first of all you have to understand what attracts somebody to your company. Like what is the reason people want to join in the first place? And if the whole reason why people want to join is because what you're doing is really hot right now, right? They're around and they want to join an AI startup, and you're doing AI, and the primary reason they want to join is because you're doing something with AI and they want to do something with AI, or they want to be part of a company that does something with AI. That doesn't mean that it's going to be a bad hire or you won't be able to retain them, but it does say a lot, right? It's like again, to the marriage example or the partnership dating example, it's like somebody that says, I am just optimizing for money. How much money are you making? You're like, I'm making a ton of money. If that's why what attracts them to you, you'll have to understand that they'll optimize for that probably for the rest of their career, which means the moment they meet someone that makes more money than you, sayonara, they're going to be gone. And so once maybe AI isn't hot and there's some other thing that's hot, that employee is going to be gone. Or if it looks like your AI startup is not a rocket ship and struggling in the first year, they'll try to join a rocket ship, right? So they're going to be more transactional because their reasons for joining have only to do with what I would call pretty superficial reasons, right? And that's fine. But for us, it was always important to understand: is this somebody that joins and wants to join us because of reasons that are deeper than just what we offer on the surface, right? Is this somebody that cares about working with great people? Is this somebody that wants to build something great? Is this somebody that is interested in solving problems and contributing in really meaningful ways? So there was a time where remote startups were really hot, and when we would interview people and they would tell us, oh, I applied because I'm looking for remote gigs. And the thing that really attracts me at close is that this is a remote job. We would like that. And then we'd ask, cool, beyond being a remote job, what else do you care about? And when they seem to be struggling with answering it, or when the answer seemed very superficial, we would just not hire that person, right? Because it seemed like they're attracted to us for something that doesn't seem lasting. So I would say that you need to understand, are they connected to the core culture and some of the reasons that you have that will sustain past superficial things, right? Past things that will change. So that's one. The other thing is, I think a lot of retention has to do with like the kind of relationships that you build with people, the kind of relationships people are building with their coworkers at work. Everybody wants to have deep, meaningful relationships in their life. That's what makes life, truly wealthy, is the quality of our relationships. If at work everything is transactional, it will feel disposable, it will feel empty, and you will look for thrills as an employee somewhere else. Salary, exciting, sort of like a career title changes, whatever it is, you're going to be looking for exciting superficial things to drive your decision making and to drive your decision on where to go next. But when you find deep, meaningful connections and the people you work with, you respect, you admire, you learn from, you feel deeply connected to, you're just not going to be as tempted to look around constantly at, is there something better out there? Is there something I'm missing out on? All these kind of superficial questions will melt away, and you're just going to be heads down focused on the work that you're doing. I think that's one of the reasons why people have stuck around for a really long time. Many, many people have told me when they joined and I told them, if you're not interested in working with somebody for a decade, don't work with them for a single day. I'm only interested in relationships that will last for a very long time. just recently had a conversation with a manager at our company that said, Steli, he had, I think he recently had his 7 or 8 year company anniversary, and he said, I remembered you telling me this in the interviewing process, and I remember distinctly thinking, bullshit. There's no way, absolutely no way I would work anywhere for a decade. This is never going to happen. It's like, this is my 8th year, and I'm like, yeah, the decade, that's easy piece. I'm definitely going to be around for a decade. How much longer than that? I don't know. Will it be 50 years? Will it be 20? I'm not sure. Right. So I think that people stay because they feel deeply connected to the people, to the culture, and to the things they're building, to the customer base they're serving. Right. The deeper those connections are, the more people are going to be fulfilled at work and not interested in hopping over to something else. And I'll say that, connecting this a little bit to also what makes great, early company employees, for all the people that have joined in very junior roles at Close, junior developers, support people, personal assistants, and are now director and VP levels at this company a decade later. What all these people have in common is that these people were incredibly adaptable, were passionate about creating value, helping their coworkers, helping the company, helping the customers, and that over time evolved at a really fast rate with the business. And so, that we're ultimately very resourceful people, and people that every single one of them has one thing in common, which is that they would see opportunities, things that aren't being done, things that are breaking apart, that nobody has the time or responsibility to take care of. And they just stepped in and took over. They stepped in and solved things because there was a need. A lot of times that led to sort of a career in management, or even a career in being a very sort of absolute senior staff member as an individual contributor. So having these qualities, I think, makes a big difference to succeeding and longevity at a startup.
Yeah, it's those growth opportunities. Like if you show people that they have a career path, I actually just came from a hiring software startup, and we did a survey of job seekers one time. It was like a retention survey or whatever, and one of the questions we asked was, "Why did you leave your last job?" And the number two reason behind not enough money was zero growth opportunities, not even like a whisper of, oh, this is how you can grow at this company. So you might not be able to pay as much as the next place, but if you offer people a path to growth, that's also the type of thing that could retain them. Last question. What are your favorite interview questions to ask people? Do you have any favorites? Do you have any questions that you ask that you think sort of tell you a lot about a person, and what are they?
So I used to have plenty of them, and I used to take pride in how creative they were, or unexpected. The reactions I would get from both people that were interviewing, as well as from other founders or even team members, the admiration. Wow, Steli is such a deep thinker. Nobody's ever thought about this. That would give me great pleasure and boost my ego. I care less about it today, and I'll tell you why, but then I'll still give you your few questions that I used to use a lot, and that used to give me a lot of delight, or some interesting conversations that might be helpful for others. I'll tell you one thing. The thing that I optimize for today is less asking very clever questions that might bring up interesting nuggets about the person. The thing that I optimize more today is, how crystal clear am I on who we're looking for? What is it I'm looking for? I find that most of the times, as in anything in life, and in particular also everything in a startup or in business, people are lacking clarity. They're a little fuzzy. They're like, we think we want this thing and that thing and that thing. And they cast a very wide net, or they describe things in very broad terms. And when you're a little fuzzy about who you're looking for, you're going to be a little fuzzy about who the person is or isn't, or how to evaluate people. It'll depend on your mood, on your personality. You and the other people that interview the people will have vastly different opinions and responses to them. The most powerful thing you can do is to be crystal clear on who you're looking for. Then, even if you miss asking a really clever question, if you get 45 minutes or 60 minutes with somebody, if you're crystal clear, it's going to be easy to see, does this person fit this very concrete pattern or not. But when you're a little fuzzy, then everything becomes sort of like more confusing, more astrology. You have to do all these complicated things to figure out if you should hire somebody or not. So, having said that out of the way, a couple of fun interview questions that I used to ask. I used to ask people, what's something, what is something that is easy to misunderstand about you the first time you get to know you, right? What is something that people told you after a couple of months of working with you that they either misunderstood about you when they first met you, or that it took them a long time to uncover, right, about you? That gets people sometimes to open up or to share something that's kind of interesting, or even to share something that maybe it's a double check on you if you think, oh, this person seems very arrogant. And then they say, people think I'm arrogant early, but over time they realize I'm really lovely and I have a lot of deep conversation. But here's the reason why I think I come across that way. That might add context to sort of your own judgment about them. So that's a question that I used to ask a lot. I used to ask a lot of people to tell me why it's not going to work out, right? Imagine we're working together. Obviously, you present yourself in the best possible way. We try to present ourselves in the best possible way. Sometimes people and companies are so good at presenting themselves in the best possible way, it's a totally different thing they're presenting than themselves, right? And then you join a company, and a couple of months later, you're like, this is a totally different opportunity than what they sold me on. And this happens in the reverse. The company says, this person was a completely different person during the interviewing process than it turns out in reality, because nobody can keep up their best version all the time, right? We're going to eventually all end up in reality. I would, challenge people sometimes and say, hey, if it didn't work out, right? And I'll go first. I would be kind enough to do that. I would tell them, I'm going to bring up things that are messed up about us, things that people hate, reasons why people don't like working here. And then you might bring up something that, companies didn't like about your teams, and we can play a game of chicken and see, can we scare each other away from wanting to work with each other? If we can, better to do it now than in 3 months. If we can't, it's not perfect science, but maybe it's a really great indicator that this is going to work out. People were always terrified, but because the premise of this,
That's
yeah, it's
risky.
very risky. But it's, what are they have to do a lot of calculus in terms of like what to share and what not to share. And it keeps them on their toes. And so I always enjoy that because it made for interesting conversations. Sometimes people are very lame about what they want to share or not want to share. And even for me, sometimes it was hard not to share negatives in a way that seemed positive, right? Where I'm like, oh, we're just too honest and too hardworking, and we're just too, I don't know what, like we care too much about our work.
We make too much
Yeah,
money. I wish we didn't make so much
yeah, too
money.
much success. So it can definitely very easily erode into bullshit land. But it was something that I would use. Hey, if you joined and 3 months down the line it turned out, no, this isn't working. What could be a reason for this, right? That would be a question that I would ask people. And then the other thing is just what I find is that many times, because you want to ask a list of questions and you want to get through all your questions, you never go deep, right? So you ask 20 superficial questions and you're only able to just touch the surface, right? Have you ever tell me about the most successful campaign and what the impact was? Well, I did a campaign and it had 200% growth in this area. Cool. Tell me about a time that you struggled with your manager. You just go from thing to thing to thing. You learn nothing that way, very little. The opposite is also true. Some people just take the first question and then they dig deeper, 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 deeper. Sometimes you find gold at the very end and you learned everything you needed to learn. But sometimes after like 45 minutes of going deeper and deeper, you hit, a nothing burger and you're like, all right, now we wasted all this time digging in an area that didn't have anything, that didn't hit gold or oil. So you want to find a good balance and find enough surface area that you have sort of a good 360 overview of a bunch of things that you want to understand about them, but where you also pick one or two things where you go deep with them. And oftentimes, when you go deep with people, you really find out what they're made of. And a lot of times people have interview answers prepared, but once you go a bit deeper and you prod into your understanding in a lot more detail, they either fall apart. All of a sudden, the 400% growth meant, they went from 1 to 4 subscribers on that Twitter account, right? And it's like not really meaningful in terms of what they were really able to do. Or you uncover that they didn't really do the work themselves. There were designers, engineers, all kinds of other people that did all the work, and now they sort of claim the results a little bit because they were involved in one way or another. So um, don't be too attached to your questions and structure. You have to have a bit of a structure, but make sure that you cover a good amount of things, but you also go into depth, at least in one or two areas that really matter.
As you were giving me your examples of those questions, I remember you asking me those just 6 months ago or however long it was that I was hired. And I'm like, what did I say to that? It must have been good because I'm here. But I couldn't for the life of me remember. Either way, I'm glad you hired me because now I'm here and I get to talk to you every week. And next week, we're going to be talking about sort of related to hiring, but more about operating the company overall with core values and why you need core values. I think core values should be guiding your hiring decisions, for example. We didn't really touch on that, but we will next week or next episode. Not next week. I don't think we do this on a weekly basis. But either way, Steli, thank you for hiring me. Thank you for joining me here today. Bye-bye, everybody.